Okay, so your film, Greystone Park, is it documentary or is it like a Blair Witch kind of documentary or a real documentary?
No, we don't say that it's a documentary, that
Yeah.
it's found footage. We say that it's inspired by actual events.
Mm-hmm.
It's shot in the documentary style, so but it's a unique story. It's not like Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity because those were not based upon anything actual, or Paranormal Activity was basically based on shadow people, and they never really got into detail. Whereas in our story, we actually talk more about the shadow people, that phenomenon of the shadow attacks, and the idea that there's this other dimension of reality. And once the kids enter Greystone, which was a real mental hospital in Jersey, that my friend Alex Wraith and I broke into multiple times and based our story upon that. That hospital, I think, is like a portal to another dimension,
Hmm.
and it's truly a spooky place, and many people have gone exploring there as well. So you can check it out for yourself if you don't believe us, and
I
try
would.
breaking in one night and seeing how you feel about it. But we tried to keep it as authentic as possible when making the film, in the sense of shooting real haunted places, keeping the integrity of how it feels to explore in the dark, with a handheld camera, really just trying to use the camera becomes the eye of the viewer, and just like with when you're inside there, you don't always know what you're dealing with. You hear things, you react without necessarily saying it, and step by step, I think we do have a payoff, but it's definitely a gradual, it's a build. It's not just a film that has slasher effects and
Do you have
gimmicks
CGI or
and
did you see
gimmicks
the
throughout.
actual?
You will see some things inside, and it's not based on CGI. No, we kept the CGI very minimal. I'm not a big fan of computer-generated imagery. I'm much more of a proponent of real effects, in-camera effects, and just the tricks of light and shadow, basically. So where we had to, affect things with CGI, we maybe upped things a little bit, but pretty much everything you see was there on the day, at the locations.
And I was reading in your bio that you follow Islam and you're interested in the jinn, which are magical beings. Is that connected to these kind of beings that you were?
Well, I got interested in the jinn realm, which in Islam, the jinns are said to have been created by God when He created man and the angels. And the jinn are like what we call genies in the West, but they are all those entities that are existent in the fourth and other dimensions that we don't see. And so there's many different descriptions of what they look like, and some people even say that they are the aliens that we talk about. Those are also called jinn. But I found out about jinn because Alex Wraith, my co-writer and co-star in the film, is actually Lebanese, and so his culturally he knew about the jinn, and he referenced it a few times. So as we went through this realm of you know ghosts and shadows and demons and whatnot, he referred to it as jinn at one point, and that is what caught my interest. And when I went to Iran recently, I've been to Iran 3 times in the last year looking at film projects, because jinn are culturally known and talked about in that region. I thought it'd be interesting to actually also try to do a documentary by talking to people who are sort of jinn masters, and they deal with that realm.
Hmm. Is that connected to, like, in the old days they talked about the old hag or witches or things like that in a hypnagogic state? Sometimes people would feel that there were beings. Is that similar?
It's all
Or?
connected. I mean, the
Mhm.
truth is that we've cut out that supernatural part of our life in the last 500 years, and then especially in the last 100 years or so. This sort of materialistic culture has superseded the desire to deal with that realm of what is beyond 3 dimensions. Those things that happen at night, what we call shadow attacks, are described, scientifically as sleep paralysis, and they describe it to certain neurological malfunctions. And yet, there's a very common strand that runs through it, which is people seeing shadows or some kind of entities in the room and feeding upon them. And that interaction oftentimes was ascribed to witchcraft and sorcery. So there's a whole realm of knowledge about this occult that has not been talked about. Let's say in the last, it's only talked about within like what it's called satanic circles or whatnot. But I think the war of the Catholic Church against witchcraft was so complete that it also uh, overwhelmed the ability to actually study that which exists in nature and exists in the quantum physical world, and even people like Jung were fascinated by, but we've kind of many people have tried to ignore it, and I think it's coming back. There's been resurgence especially the last 5 years, 6 years. If you think about the number of paranormal films and possession films, it's like a dozen films that have been mainstream box office hits dealing with possession.
Well, a lot of it's in terms of like sci-fi, but when you talk about it, it's like you're saying that it's a real phenomena that exists. Is it associated with like astral travel or things like that?
Astral projection is another part of it, which Insidious dealt with very well. Astral projection is something that Alex Wraith, my co-writer on it, has experienced, and I would say I've experienced, although I'm not as I wouldn't call myself a proficient astral traveler, at least consciously so. But again, this is all dealing with that realm of occult knowledge that is more and more hidden and talked about only within mystery schools, and actually talked about more openly in certain Eastern cultures. In Islam, for example, you can talk about the jinn and not be considered crazy, whereas here, if you talk about demons, it's unless you actually understand that world. If you're a true believing Christian, for example, they who actually has dealt with this, I've talked to many who respect that understanding, but unless you have that religious faith or understanding of it, you would be written off as crazy.
Are they always considered evil, or can they be good?
No, not at all. I mean, it's not that they're all evil in any capacity. The jinn in Islam are not all evil, and in the West, maybe we call too much paranormal activity demonic. I don't necessarily believe it's all demonic. I think there's plenty of entities of both light and dark, and sometimes the dark ones are the ones that get the attention because they're troublemakers, and they can be devious and almost they can, in a sense, they create situations, they create conflict, they create fear, which is great cinematically. But usually it's the angels, the light beings that are the ones protecting you, making sure you survive the incident, and you don't really, you don't necessarily see them or ascribe that protection to them, which ultimately goes back to a faith in God, and that's something we didn't get into in this film. We didn't get too deeply into the faith of God that protects the characters, but there is reference when you see that when my character gets possessed, that Alex is referencing God and basically saying, you're with God, and he's trying to use that language to get him back to reality.
And then, what was it like working with your father, being in the opposite role?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually quite a fun dinner because it was a simple scene. It was a dinner table discussion, candlelit dinner with red wine and hookah, so everyone was quite relaxed, and he's a great storyteller. He just had to give, it was quite a bit of dialogue, even 3 pages of dialogue, but he knew that story since before because he had told that to me as a kid, the story of Crazy Kate, who he saw as a little boy in the woods, or he says he saw, and that's always been one of those mysterious stories that intrigued me about the paranormal. Was my father joking with me when he told me this? Was he making it up, or had he really seen this old lady, old Medusa-like lady in the forest that terrified him? And that story, he recounted to us at the dinner table, and so it was quite nice, to have a scene with him and get it in, just shoot it in and out, get him in and out, because he's a busy guy. He's like, he was like our movie star for this shoot. We didn't have any movie stars, so with him, it's like you have to really keep it quick and get him out of there.
And in the Doors movie, they had that spiritual aspect with the Indians and everything. So you were actually in that scene, right? So is that something you grew up with, that kind of
No,
thing,
because
or?
I believe that spirituality you have to come to upon in your own time, in your own right. I mean, I know that my father has dealt with ghosts almost subliminally in his films. As you said, the Doors has the reference to the ghost, the native spirit that comes through Jim Morrison. In Any Given Sunday, there's the ghost of the past, of the black and white, dead football players coming into the game. Heaven and Earth is about, my dad was a war veteran, so he dealt with ghosts in his capacity as having experienced death. So I think, he went through his experience with it. I've gone through mine, and my experience of ghosts, is a little bit different, because I'm approaching it more from the shadow realm of fear and how they inspire fear. So it's not so much ghosts as it is something more insidious, maybe something more demonic. But at the end of the day, we go back to I think, the concept that he states at the beginning, which is they're in your mind. The ghosts, the fears, are in your mind. We can empower them, or we can get a hold of our fears. And that's really the essence of the story, is that the kids in Greystone are basically overwhelmed by their fears, that they start to let them run away.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you want to talk about the film that you haven't said yet?
I mean, I think those are
That's pretty good.
the key
Okay.
points.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Of course. My pleasure.